The Portland Union Station was never quiet, even at midnight. The glass roof above the concourse trembled with the rumble of departing trains, while neon signs flickered in tired hues of red and green. A steady drizzle painted the streets outside, soaking the shoes of hurried travelers who dashed through the revolving doors, pulling coats tight against the autumn chill. Mai kept her head low as she shuffled into the station, her toddler pressed against her chest. The boy was heavy, almost 20 pounds now, but she refused to let him walk barefoot across the cold tiles. His name was Nathan, though she called him Nam, a soft syllable that reminded her of lullabies her mother used to sing. Tonight, Nam was feverish. His skin burned against her neck as she carried him, his small fists clinging to her sweater. The ticket machine had already eaten the last of her crumpled bills. She stared at the flimsy slip in her hand. Eugene, 1 adult, 1 child. Departure 11:40 p.m. The numbers blurred through her tired eyes. It wasn't home, not really. But her sister's spare room was better than the eviction notice pinned to her apartment door. Doorknob began to fuss, whimpering first, then crying louder. Heads turned. A businessman in a grey trench coat muttered something under his breath about people who shouldn't travel with kids. A pair of college students glanced over, whispering to each other with raised eyebrows. Mai hugged Nam tighter. She, baby, just a little longer. Mummy's here. She found her way down the platform where the night train waited, its steel sides slick with rain. The engine growled like an animal impatient to run. Mai climbed the steep steps into the car, juggling diaper bag, ticket, and child. The interior smelled faintly of coffee and old upholstery. Yellow bulbs buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sickly glow. Seats were half filled, tired men in wrinkled suits, women with headphones, a cluster of teenagers with backpacks. The air was heavy with exhaustion, the shared weariness of strangers forced into the same steel tube. Mai slid into a seat near the back, praying for invisibility. Nam squirmed, crying louder now, his cheeks flushed scarlet. She bounced him gently, whispering promises of crackers and warm blankets, though she had neither. The cries only sharpened, piercing through the car. A woman across the aisle rolled her eyes. Seriously, can you quiet him down? Heat flushed Mai's face. I'm trying. Maybe you should have stayed home, the woman muttered. Turning away, Mai bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted blood. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to scream. Mostly, she wanted Nam's fever to break. Then, from across the aisle, a man's voice, calm, deep, and startlingly steady. May I help? Mai turned. The speaker sat alone, dressed in a charcoal suit that looked impossibly crisp for this hour. His tie was loosened, but only slightly, as if even relaxation came with rules. His dark hair was slicked back, a sheen of rain still clinging to it. He was younger than she expected, maybe early 30s, but there was something world-weary in his eyes, something that didn't belong to this crowded train car. He extended his hands. Sometimes babies settle better with a new set of arms. Only if you're comfortable. Mai hesitated. Every alarm in her body screamed no. He was a stranger, a man. And yet there was something disarming in his tone, something that slipped beneath her defenses. Nam's cries had become ragged sobs, his tiny chest heaving. She swallowed hard. I don't think the man softened his smile, not pushing. I understand. Just offering, but then Nam reached out. To Mai's shock, her son's fever-hot fingers stretched toward the stranger. as if he recognized something in the man's face. Against her better judgment, Mai transferred her son into the man's arms, and silence fell. The businessman adjusted Nam effortlessly, supporting his head, one hand resting steady on the child's back. He began to hum Nat, a lullaby, not a melody Mai recognized, but low, rhythmic notes that seemed to sync with the train's vibrations. Nom's cries hiccuped, then dwindled. Within moments, the child's eyes fluttered shut. The car exhaled in collective relief. The woman across the aisle popped her earbuds back in. The teenagers chuckled, impressed. Mai sat frozen, her chest hollow, her arms suddenly empty. The man glanced at her. See, he just needed a different rhythm. Mai blinked. Who are you? Just another passenger, he said simply, though his tailored cufflinks and polished leather shoes argued otherwise. He rocked Nam gently, his gaze never leaving the child's face. Something about him unsettled her. He was too composed to clean in this grimy train car, but it was more than that. It was the way he looked at Nomnat with impatience, not even with pity. It was familiarity, as if he had held countless children before, as if this was second nature. Mai's throat tightened. Thank you, she whispered. He nodded, accepting no further praise. Get some rest. I'll keep him comfortable. She wanted to protest, wanted to snatch Nam back and curl around him like a shield. But exhaustion pinned her to the seat. For the first time all day, her son wasn't crying. For the first time in weeks, silence wasn't terrifying. Mai leaned back, eyes stinging with unshed tears. Outside, the train lurched forward, wheels clattering against wet steel, carrying them deeper into the night. Mai sat frozen for a long moment, her hands empty, her chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. She had carried her son every waking hour for months, through bus rides, through grocery store lines, through restless nights in a studio apartment that echoed with silence. And now, in the stranger's arms, Nam slept as though the world had always been this kind, steady, warm, safe. Her instinct screamed at her to take him back. Yet exhaustion pressed down heavier than instinct. The man's shoulders were broad, his grip firm but gentle, and for the first time since the fever began, Nom's tiny fists had unclenched. Don't worry, the man said softly, as if sensing the storm inside her. I won't let him fall. Mai blinked at him, caught between gratitude and suspicion. He wasn't like the men she'd known, her ex who walked out when she told him she was pregnant, the landlord who leered at her while demanding late rent, the bus driver who sneered when Nam cried too loud. This one, his voice was calm, his gaze level, without judgment. Still, she asked the question anyway. Why are you doing this? The man tilted his head. Rain streaked down the window behind him, glinting in the yellow train lights. Because I can, that's not an answer. It's the only one I've got tonight. He glanced down at Nam. Besides, I've been here before. Different child, same fevered cries. Mai's heart skipped. You have kids. His jaw flexed, as though the words cost him something. Not anymore. The hum of the train filled the silence that followed. Mai swallowed her next question. Whatever story lived in his chest, it wasn't hers to pry open. Instead, she studied him. He looked out of place, with his pressed suit and polished shoes, but his posture betrayed fatigue. He sat like a man who had spent too many nights awake, shoulders squared out of habit, not energy. His eyes grey, sharp drifted toward the window. Yet every few seconds, he checked Nom's breathing. adjusting the boy's position with surprising ease. Mai leaned her head against the cold glass, closing her eyes for a moment. She hadn't planned this journey. She hadn't planned most things, truth be told. Life after the eviction had become a blur of panicked decisions, pawn shops, food banks, long walks, carrying groceries and baby, nights staring at the ceiling, wondering if tomorrow would be the day someone reported her to child services. She never wanted to leave Portland, but tonight she was running not toward home, but away from the wreckage she couldn't mend. When she woke, the train had settled into its rhythm, wheels clattering in a lullaby she almost believed. A blanket, coarse and scratchy, was draped over her lap. Nam was still asleep, but no longer in her arms. Panic shot through her chest. She jerked upright. "Relax," the man's voice said. He was still there. Across from her, Nam nestled securely against him, blanket tucked around the boy's small body. "You looked like you needed rest more than he needed rocking." Mai flushed. "You could have given him back." "I would have. But you were out cold. Not even a freight train would have woken you." He smiled faintly, almost teasing, though his eyes didn't quite join in. Mai's fingers tightened on the blanket. "Thank you," she murmured again, though gratitude sat awkwardly on her tongue. The man shifted, reaching into his jacket. He pulled out a slim wallet, removed something, and without a word, slid it into the diaper bag at her feet. Her pulse spiked. What was that? "Nothing important," he said too casually. Mai leaned forward, unzipped the bag, and froze. Inside was a crisp envelope, fat with folded bills. Her stomach churned hot with shame and fury. She yanked it out, slapped it onto his knee. "What the hell is this?" His expression remained infuriatingly calm. "Help. I don't want your help." Her voice cracked, echoing louder than she intended. Heads turned from nearby rows. The man lowered his tone, patient. "Your son's fever is high. You'll need medicine, maybe a doctor. This can cover it." Her eyes burned. "Do you think I'm a charity case? Some pitiful woman you can throw money at to ease your conscience?" He studied her for a long second. "No, then why?" The train swayed, shadows sliding across his face. When he finally answered, his voice was quieter than before. "Because I've been where you are. Once, on this very train, I was broke, hungry, and scared. Someone handed me money, and it saved my life. I don't know their name. I never repaid them. But I promised, if I ever had the chance, I'd do the same." Mai's chest rose and fell with ragged breaths. The envelope trembled in her fist. She wanted to hurl it down the aisle, wanted to scream at him for assuming she couldn't stand on her own 2 feet. But then Nam stirred, whimpering, his face hot against the man's chest. The memory of his fever clawed through her anger. She shoved the envelope back into the bag, not agreeing, not thanking, but not throwing it away either. The man said nothing more. The train thundered into the night, carrying all 3 of them deeper into the unknown. The hours blurred together, stitched by the steady rhythm of the train and the hiss of rain against the windows. Mai dozed in fits, always jerking awake at the smallest sound from Nam, each time. She found him still nestled against the stranger's chest, his breathing shallow but steady. The man never once complained. He sat anchored in his seat, watching the dark countryside roll past. Like a sentinel guarding to souls he had no reason to protect. When the clock above the car door clicked, towed to a dot Nom's small body shuddered. At first it was subtler, twitch in his limbs, a whimper, Then suddenly his face scrunched in pain, his skin flushed deep crimson. His eyes rolled, unfocused. Nam. I lurched forward, panic clawing her throat. She pressed her palm to his forehead. It burned like fire. The man frowned, shifting the boy upright. He's hotter than before. I scrambled through her bag, pulling out a half-empty bottle of infant acetaminophen, then cursed under her breath. I already gave him the last dose hours ago. It's not working. Nam whimpered louder, then began to cry weakly, too weakly. The sound was more frightening than the earlier wail stin, fragile, desperate. Passengers nearby stirred, irritated at first, then unsettled when they saw the child's flushed face. A woman gasped, "That baby doesn't look right. He's burning up," another murmured. Mai's hands shook. What do I do? God, what do I do? The man was already on his feet. We get him to a doctor. This train doesn't stop until Salem, a voice called from the back. Then it will stop sooner, the man said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Mai's eyes widened. You can't just, but he was already striding down the aisle, Nam cradled firmly in his arms. He flagged the conductor, a heavy-set man in a navy uniform, who blinked in surprise. My son, the man said firmly, is in medical distress. You need to radio the next signal and arrange an unscheduled stop. The conductor's jaw tightened. Sir, we don't, you do tonight. His voice dropped lower, colder. He reached into his coat and flashed something an ID. A badge, whatever it was. The conductor's face paled. Do it now. Mai stumbled after them, clutching her bag, her heart in her throat. Who was this man, to command with such authority, to make people obey without hesitation? The train began to slow. The metallic shriek of brakes screamed through the night. Passengers clutched seats, muttering in alarm. Within minutes, the doors hissed open to a deserted platform in a small Oregon town, rain pouring under the flickering streetlight. The man didn't wait for assistance. He bolted down the steps, carrying Nam close, Mai racing beside him. Across the street, as if summoned, headlights sliced through the rain. A black SUV skidded to a stop. A woman in scrubs jumped out, carrying a medical bag. Dr. Carter, the man called. Here, Mai's breath caught. He had already called ahead. He had known this would happen. The doctor pressed a thermometer against Nam's temple, checked his pulse, his breathing. Fevers at 104. He needs fluids immediately. She hustled them inside a small clinic tucked beside the station, lights flickering awake as staff scrambled. Mai clutched the exam table, trembling as Dr. Carter and a nurse worked. 4-line, cool cloths, whispered jargon she couldn't process. Nam's tiny chest rose and fell with terrifying effort. Her knees gave out. She sank into a chair, tears streaking her face. The man crouched beside her. His suit was soaked through, rain dripping from his hair, but his eyes were steady. He took her shaking hand without asking. He's going to be okay, he said. I promise you, he's going to be okay. Mai wanted to believe him. She wanted to cling to his words like a lifeline, but fear still twisted inside her, cruel and relentless. She searched his face, desperate. Who are you? For the first time that night, he hesitated. Something flickered in his expression, pain, memory, something unspoken. Finally, he said quietly, someone who won't walk away. The storm outside howled louder, but inside the small clinic, a fragile hope began to take root. Mai sat clutching the stranger's hand, her son fighting fever under the glow of sterile lights. The train forgotten on the tracks. The night that had begun with despair had turned into something else entirely, something terrifying, something miraculous, something that would not end here. And as Mai met the man's unwavering gaze, she realized her life had just shifted in a way she could never undo. The clinic smelled faintly of antiseptic and old linoleum. Harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, washing every corner in sterile white. Mai sat hunched in a plastic chair, clutching the damp blanket around her shoulders. Her legs trembled, still soaked from the rain outside. On the exam table, Nam slept at last, his fever slowly breaking under the drip of 4 fluids. His small hand twitched occasionally, but the angry flush had faded from his cheeks. A nurse adjusted the line, murmured something reassuring, then left the room. Mai exhaled a shuddering breath. She felt hollow, emptied of everything except the sound of her son's breathing. Across the room, the man remained. His soaked jacket hung from a chair, revealing a starched white shirt that somehow hadn't wrinkled despite the chaos. He stood by the window, rain streaking down the glass behind him. His silhouette tall, composed, like a soldier awaiting orders. Mai couldn't stand the silence any longer. You called that doctor before the train even stopped. He didn't turn. Yes, how? I have resources. That's not an answer. Finally, he faced her. His expression was calm, but his eyes were not. They carried the same storm that had followed him all night. Sharp grey cutting through the sterile light. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Mai's throat tightened. Try me. He studied her for a moment, as though weighing how much truth to reveal. Then he said, My name is Daniel Reed. The name tickled some faint recognition, but Mai couldn't place it. Portland was a small city compared to New York or Los Angeles, but she didn't keep up with business headlines. You make it sound like I should know who that is. Most people do. He said it not with pride, but with resignation, as though fame were a burden rather than an achievement. Mai bristled. Well, I don't. To me, you're just some stranger on a train who thinks he can throw money at people. His jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. If I could buy away suffering, I would. But it doesn't work like that. The words landed heavy in the room, thick with personal weight. Mai pulled the blanket tighter, fighting the urge to shiver. Why are you even here? Men like you don't ride night trains through Oregon towns. You have planes, cars, chauffeurs. Daniel's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. Sometimes, the train is the only place where I can be invisible. Invisible. The word clung to her. This man was anything but invisible. His presence radiated command, every movement deliberate. And yet, she saw it now, a flicker of weariness beneath the polished exterior. The exhaustion of someone who had spent too long under watchful eyes. She opened her mouth to press further, but Nam stirred. His small whimper cut through every thought. Mai was at his side in an instant, smoothing his damp hair. Daniel followed silently, watching as she bent over her son with a mother's fierce tenderness. His gaze softened almost imperceptibly, something fragile breaking through his control. You're strong, he said quietly. Mai blinked up at him, surprised. I don't feel strong. You are. He glanced at Nam. You've carried the weight of 2 lives on your shoulders, and you're still standing. That's more strength than most men I've ever met. The compliment unsettled her more than insults ever could. She wanted to argue, to insist she was failing. That strength wasn't running from an eviction notice with nothing but a train ticket. But the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she asked, "Why do you care? About me, about him? You don't know us." Daniel's eyes held hers. For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then he said, "Maybe I do." Mai stared at him, her fingers tangled in her son's blanket. "Maybe I do." The words echoed in her chest like a riddle. "What does that mean?" she demanded. Daniel leaned against the counter, arms folded. His shirt clung damply to his frame, but he didn't seem to notice. His eyes were on Nam, soft in a way that unsettled her more than any cold indifference could. "It means," he said at last, "that sometimes you meet people and it feels less like chance, more like recognition." Mai frowned. "Recognition? We've never met." Daniel's gaze flicked to her, sharp, searching. "Haven't we?" She shifted uncomfortably, heat rising in her face. "No, I'd remember someone like you." The corner of his mouth curved slightly. "Fair enough." The room fell into silence again, broken only by the steady drip of the IV outside. Rain continued to lash against the clinic's windows. Relentless. Mai hated the way he unsettled her. She was used to men who wanted things, money, convenience, bodies. But Daniel didn't fit. He wasn't asking for anything, and that made him harder to trust. Finally, she said, "Why were you on that train?" He exhaled slowly, as though the answer carried weight. "Because sometimes even men with too much need to disappear. The train gives me anonymity. No assistance. No meetings. No headlines. Headlines." The word struck her again, a reminder that he wasn't just some ordinary man in a suit. She crossed her arms, defensive. "You talk like you're important." His laugh was quiet, humorless. "Some would say that." "I don't know if it's true." Her brow furrowed. "What do you do?" He hesitated, as if considering whether to reveal anything. "Then, I own a company." "What kind?" "Finance. Investments. Boring to anyone outside the industry." Boring. It was the last word she would have chosen for him. The way he commanded the train staff, the way a doctor had appeared on Kunanovich was boring. It was power, the kind Mai had never been close enough to touch. "And yet you're here, on a midnight train, carrying my sick son," she said, unable to hide the disbelief in her voice. "Doesn't add up." Daniel's expression softened. "Life rarely does." Her chest tightened. She wanted to push him further, pry open the secrets he carried so tightly. But Nam stirred again, his eyelids fluttering, and she bent quickly over him. "Baby." "Mummy's here," she whispered, pressing a kiss to his damp forehead. When she looked back up, Daniel was watching her with an intensity that made her heart stumble. It wasn't lust, nor pity. It was something else, something heavier. "You remind me of someone," he said quietly. Mai blinked. "Who?" He hesitated. For the first time since she'd met him, his composure slipped. His throat worked as he swallowed, his eyes shifting toward the rain-smeared window. "My sister," he said at last. Mai's breath caught. She was young, strong, like you. She carried too much weight for too long. His voice lowered, roughened. She died before anyone helped her. The confession hit the room like a stone dropped into still water, ripples spreading. Mai's anger, her suspicion, even her exhaustion paused, rearranging themselves around this revelation. "I'm sorry," she whispered, though the words felt inadequate. Daniel's jaw clenched. "So am I every day." Silence stretched. The storm outside battered harder, but inside, a strange stillness grew. Mai studied him differently now. The mystery remained, but it was cracked open enough for her to glimpse the man beneath the armor. He wasn't untouchable. He was haunted. And yet, she couldn't afford to be drawn in. She had made promises to herself. No more men. No more leaning on strangers. No more illusions of rescue. Still, when Daniel finally spoke again, his words sank deeper than she wanted them to. "I couldn't save her," he murmured, eyes on Nam, "but maybe I can help save him." The clinic had settled into a late-night quiet, the kind that stretched minutes into hours. The nurse had dimmed the overhead lights, leaving only the glow of a lamp near Nom's bed. Shadows lay across the linoleum floor, flickering as cars passed outside on the wet street. Mai sat close to her son, one hand resting on his small leg. He was cooler now, color returning to his cheeks, but the memory of his burning skin still made her chest seize. Across from her, Daniel hadn't moved much. He had given up his chair and stood by the window, hands in his pockets, his profile outlined in pale yellow light. Every so often, his gaze shifted back to Nam, as if reassuring himself the boy was still breathing. Mai broke the silence first. "You didn't have to stay, I know. Most men wouldn't. I'm not most men." The certainty in his tone set her on edge. She hated the way he said things as if they were immovable truths. "You don't even know us," she snapped, though her voice wavered. Daniel turned fully to her now. His eyes weren't cold, they were steady, unflinching. "I know enough." Mai's breath caught anger and confusion twisting together. "What is that supposed to mean?" He stepped closer, but not too close, leaving space between them. "It means I see you. The fight in your shoulders. The way you've been running on fumes for months. The desperation you bury under pride." His voice softened, almost gentle. "And I see in the weight you carry alone. You shouldn't have to." The words scraped something raw inside her. For a moment she wanted to scream, to tell him to stop dissecting her life with those sharp eyes. But another part of Hertha, exhausted, bone-deep, weary, partaked with the dangerous temptation of believing him. "You think you can fix this with money?" she whispered bitterly. "No," his answer was immediate. "Money can't fix grief. It can't fix loneliness. It can't bring back people we've lost." His gaze darkened. "I've tried." The admission cut through her like glass. He didn't elaborate, but she didn't need him to. She heard the ghosts in his voice. Mai turned away, staring at Nom's sleeping face. Her son was everything, her reason for waking, for fighting, for enduring. She couldn't afford to let anyone, especially a stranger, wedge himself into that fragile balance. "You'll be gone tomorrow," she said finally. "People like you always are." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, it was almost a vow. "Not this time." She looked back at him, startled by the intensity in his tone. Before she could respond, the door creaked open. Dr. Carter stepped inside, clipboard in hand. "He's stable for now. Fever's dropping. I'll keep him overnight for observation, but he's out of immediate danger." Relief crashed through Mai so suddenly her eyes stung. She bent over her son, kissing his warm but no longer scorching forehead. "Thank you," she breathed, though it wasn't clear if the words were for the doctor or the man still watching from the shadows. Daniel exhaled slowly, shoulders easing for the first time all night. "Good," he murmured, almost to himself. Dr. Carter gave Mai a reassuring smile. "You should get some rest. We'll take good care of him." But my new rest wouldn't come easily. Not with Daniel Reed standing only a few feet away, his presence as unsettling as it was strangely comforting. When the doctor left, silence returned, but it wasn't the same as before. It was heavier now, charged with everything unsaid. My wanted to demand answers, to shove him away, to keep her fragile world sealed tight. But when she opened her mouth, what came out was softer, almost broken. Why me? Why him? You could have ignored us. Daniel met her eyes, and for once, there was no armor in his gaze. Only truth, because I couldn't. The clinic settled into a fragile calm, the kind that comes after the worst storm has passed, but before the sky is truly clear. Nurses moved quietly, checking monitors and adjusting for drips. Rain tapped against the windows like restless fingers. I sat in the narrow cot beside Nom's bed, her hand resting lightly on his chest. She could feel the gentle rise and fall, the steady beat of life beneath fever-damp pajamas. Each breath was a fragile miracle she didn't dare take for granted. Across the room, Daniel remained. He hadn't left, not even for a moment. He sat in a chair angled toward the bed, jacket draped across the back, shirt sleeves rolled to his forearms. His posture was too straight for sleep, yet his eyes carried exhaustion. I wanted to tell him to go, that she could handle this, that she didn't need him. But every time the words reached her lips, she swallowed them down, because deep in her bones, she knew she had never been more grateful for someone's presence. Do you always stay with strangers? She asked softly, breaking the silence. Daniel's gaze lifted from Nam. Only when it matters. And why does this matter to you? His eyes didn't waver. Because he matters to you. The simplicity of it disarmed her. She looked away, her throat tight. For years, she had lived in survival mode. Every decision was about food, shelter, bills. No one had looked at her life and said it mattered. No one had looked at her son and said he mattered at least. Not in a way that wasn't tinged with pity until now. She pressed her palms together, whispering, I don't know how much more I can take. Daniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You've already taken more than most people could. You don't give yourself enough credit. A laugh slipped out, bitter and small. Credit doesn't pay rent, doesn't buy medicine. True, he paused, voice lowering. But strength isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in nights like this, when you sit by a hospital bed and refuse to let go. I glanced at him, caught off guard by the quiet conviction in his words. He wasn't patronizing. He wasn't trying to soothe her with empty platitudes. He sounded like someone who had lived through nights just like this. Her chest tightened. You talk like you've been here before. Daniel's jaw tightened. His gaze shifted toward the window, toward the rain-slick streets. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, quietly, I have. The words were simple, but the gravity in them was not my weighted. But he didn't elaborate. The silence stretched, heavy with ghosts. She didn't push. Instead, she turned back to Nam, brushing damp hair from his forehead. Her son stirred, a soft moan escaping. I froze, watching as his eyelids fluttered open. Mommy. The word was a rasp, but it was there. Mai's heart leapt. She leaned close, kissing his cheek. I'm here, baby. Mummy's right here. Nom's small hand reached for hers, gripping weakly. Relief coursed through her like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Daniel exhaled, the tension in his shoulders easing. He's strong, just like his mother. I blinked rapidly, unwilling to let him see the tears threatening to spill. She pressed Nom's hand to her lips, whispering a prayer of gratitude she hadn't dared voice in years. For a moment, the three of them sat in fragile peace, mother, child, and stranger bound together in the quiet hours of the night. But peace never lasted long. The clinic had gone still. Even the nurse's footsteps had faded, leaving only the low hum of machines and the occasional sigh of the building settling. Outside, the storm had weakened to a drizzle, a soft percussion on the windowpane. I adjusted the thin blanket around Nom, watching his chest rise and fall. His fever was lower now, but the memory of how close it had come still left her throat dry. She whispered, almost to herself, "I thought I was going to lose him tonight." Daniel shifted in his chair, leaning forward. His voice was quiet, but firm. "You didn't. He's here. That's because of you." Her eyes flicked to him. "Because of you, too." His expression softened, though he didn't smile. "Maybe both of us." The silence stretched, heavier now, filled with everything they hadn't said. I rubbed her temples, exhaustion pressing in. "You said earlier you've been here before. What did you mean?" Daniel's eyes darkened, and for a moment she thought he'd brush it off again. But instead, he drew a slow breath. "My sister," he said at last. His gaze dropped to the floor. She was 18. Smart, determined, more stubborn than anyone I knew. Our parents were gone, so she worked herself to the bone, trying to keep us both afloat. I stilled. His tone wasn't polished now. It wasn't the clipped cadence of a businessman. It was raw, unguarded. She got sick, pneumonia. I thought it was just a bad cold. She refused to see a doctor because we couldn't afford it. By the time I realized how serious it was, his voice broke, just barely. He swallowed hard. By the time I tried to fix it, it was too late. Mai's throat tightened. She had no words, only the image of a girl, young and stubborn, carrying more than she should have until her body broke under the weight. "I built everything after that," Daniel continued, voice rough. "Every company, every dollar, every so-called success of guilt. Because if I'd been stronger, smarter, richer back then, maybe she'd still be alive." The confession hung in the air like smoke, impossible to ignore. I whispered, "I'm sorry." He shook his head. "Don't be. Just don't make the same mistake she did. Don't try to carry the world alone." The words pierced her. For years she had told herself she had to, that no one was coming, no one would care enough to stay. Pride had been her armor, necessity her weapon. But sitting here, in this dim-lit clinic, with this man's haunted eyes fixed on her, that armor felt suddenly too heavy. "You don't understand," she murmured. "People leave. They always leave. And when they do, all you have is yourself. If I don't carry it all, no one will." Daniel leaned closer, his voice low but insistent. "I understand more than you think. People left me, too. But sometimes someone shows up, unexpectedly, and if you push them away, you might regret it for the rest of your life." Mai stared at him, her pulse quickening. His words felt too pointed, too close. She wanted to tell him he was wrong, that she didn't need him, that she couldn't trust anyone who promised not to leave. But Nom stirred in his sleep, letting out a soft sigh, and her resolve wavered. She brushed her son's hair back, heart aching. Daniel's gaze softened. "He's your whole world." She nodded. "He is." "Then let someone help you protect it." The plea was quiet, almost invisible beneath his composure, but Mai heard it. she felt it, and for the first time in years, she didn't know how to respond. The hours crept by, slow and heavy. The rain finally eased, leaving the world outside the clinic washed clean and eerily quiet. Inside, the machines hummed softly, steady in their rhythm, like a heartbeat keeping time with the night. Nom slept soundly now, the fever broken. His cheeks were cooler, his tiny breaths even. Every so often, his fingers twitched as though he were dreaming. Mai never let go of his hand. She sat slumped in the chair, exhaustion dragging at her bones, but she refused to look away. After everything, she couldn't bear to close her eyes, not even for a moment. Daniel still hadn't left. He sat a few feet away, silent, his gaze steady on her and the boy. Hours had passed, yet he seemed carved into the room itself, a figure who would not move until told. Finally, Mai's defenses cracked. The fear, the relief, the weight of the last 24 hours, all of it came crashing down in a whisper that broke against the stillness. I can't do this anymore. Her voice was hoarse, barely audible, but Daniel leaned forward instantly, as if he'd been waiting for those words. You are doing it, he said softly. Mai shook her head, tears slipping free despite her attempts to hold them back. No, I'm failing. I can't pay rent. I can't keep food in the fridge. I can't even keep him from getting sick. Her shoulders shook. What kind of mother am I? Daniel rose, crossing the short distance between them. He crouched at her side, meeting her eyes with a steadiness that unsettled her, the kind who carried him onto a train because you refused to give up, the kind who hasn't slept in days but still hasn't let go of his hand, the kind who'll sit in a clinic at 3A.M, whispering prayers no one else hears. Mai blinked rapidly, her tears spilling faster. You're not failing, he said, his voice firm now, edged with something raw. You're surviving, and that's harder than anyone gives you credit for. She wanted to look away, to bury her face, to pretend his words didn't reach the part of her she had tried so hard to keep locked away. But his eyes held her there, unrelenting and gentle all at once. For a long moment, neither spoke. The air between them carried too much. Her fear, his guilt, their shared scars. Finally, she whispered, Why are you really here? Daniel's jaw worked, his gaze dropping briefly to the sleeping boy before returning to her. Because I don't want you to go through what I went through, he said. Because I know what it feels like to lose everything, and I won't stand by and watch it happen again. Not if I can help it. Mai's breath hitched. She didn't understand why this stranger, this powerful man, who should have had no reason to care, spoke with such conviction, as if her life and her son's life had become tethered to his own. But in that moment, in the quiet hours before dawn, she believed him. Her hand trembled as she tightened her grip on Nom's, and she allowed herself, for the first time in years, to lean, just slightly, into someone else's strength. Daniel straightened slowly, his expression unreadable, but his voice carried the weight of a vow. You're not alone anymore. By the time the first threads of morning filtered through the blinds, the clinic no longer felt like a battlefield. The storm had passed. The air smelled faintly of coffee from the staff lounge, and the rain outside had dwindled to a mist. Mai blinked against the pale light. Her body ached from the stiff chair, her head heavy with sleeplessness. For a heartbeat she didn't know where she was. Then her gaze landed on the small figure in the bed, and relief surged all over again. Nam was still asleep, but his breathing was steady now, his fever gone. His lips parted slightly, his face soft and peaceful in a way I hadn't seen in weeks. She exhaled, shoulders sagging, as though she had been holding her breath the entire night. "You made it," she whispered, brushing a hand against her son's cheek. From across the room, Daniel stirred. He had fallen into a light sleep in the chair, head tipped back, one arm crossed loosely over his chest. The morning light revealed details I hadn't noticed before, faint lines at the corners of his eyes, the weariness etched into his jaw, the way even in sleep his posture was taut. Disciplined, he looked less like a stranger now, less like some untouchable figure who didn't belong in her world. He looked human. I turned back to Nam quickly, unwilling to dwell on the thought. A soft knock interrupted the silence. Dr. Carter entered, carrying a clipboard and a reassuring smile. "Good morning. He's responding well. Fever's broken, and his vitals are stable. I'd recommend rest, fluids, and antibiotics for a week, but he's out of danger." I closed her eyes, whispering thanks under her breath. "Can we take him home?" "Later today, yes," Dr. Carter said, "but I'd prefer to keep him for observation a few more hours." Of course, I smoothed Nom's hair. Daniel had woken fully by now, standing with quiet attention. "I'll cover any expenses," he said simply. I stiffened. "That won't be necessary." Dr. Carter glanced between them, sensing tension, then gave a gentle nod. "I'll let you two talk." With that, she slipped out. The room grew thick with silence again. I turned, her voice sharper than she intended. "You can't just keep throwing money at everything." Daniel didn't flinch. "Would you rather argue with hospital bills?" "Yes." The word burst out before she could stop it. She lowered her voice, trembling. "Because at least then it's my fight. My responsibility. If I take your money, what am I? Just some charity case you stumbled across on a train." His eyes darkened, but his tone stayed calm. "You're a mother who almost lost her son last night, and I'm someone who could help prevent it from happening again. That's all." Mai's chest heaved. She hated that part of her wanted to accept. She hated the relief that whispered through her bones at the thought of someone else carrying the weight. Even just for a moment, she turned away, pressing her forehead to Nom's small hand. "You don't even know us," she said hoarsely. Daniel's voice came steady behind her. "I know enough." Something in the way he said it made her pulse quicken. She spun back to face him. "Why do you keep saying that? What is it you think you know about me?" For the first time, his composure cracked. His gaze flicked to Nam, then back to her, as if he were balancing words that could shatter everything. Finally, he said, "Because I've seen your story before, too many times, and I couldn't save them. I won't make that mistake again." By mid-morning, the clinic's hum of activity grew louder. Nurses bustled through the halls, phones rang, the smell of brewed coffee mixed with disinfectant. Nam stirred, blinking open, bleary eyes, and whispered, "Mummy." I leaned close, relief flooding her chest. "I'm right here, sweetheart. You're okay." Daniel stood a few feet away, watching silently as Nam reached for his mother's hand. There was no mistaking the tenderness in his expression. It was the kind of look Mai had only ever seen on parents, soft, protective, reverent. The doctor signed the release papers a little after 10. "He's good to go," Dr. Carter said with a smile. "Just keep up with the meds and fluids. He'll bounce back." Mai gathered their things quickly, eager to leave. She hated the feeling of hospitals, the way they whispered of vulnerability she couldn't afford. When she stepped out into the crisp daylight, She squinted. The rain had passed, leaving the streets slick and gleaming under a pale sun. The small Oregon town smelled of wet pine and diesel, trains idling in the distance. Daniel was at her side, his jacket once again crisp and dry, as if the night hadn't touched him at all. He carried Nom's diaper bag with effortless ease. "You don't have to do that," Mai said, reaching for it. He shook his head. "I want to." Something about the simple statement unsettled her. She adjusted Nam on her hip, clutching him tighter. They walked toward the platform in silence, the sound of their footsteps echoing against the wet pavement. Passengers were already gathering for the next southbound train. Mothers with strollers, businessmen with briefcases, teenagers dragging skateboards. For all of them, it was just another ordinary day. But for Mai, the world had shifted. She glanced at Daniel from the corner of her eye. His presence was impossible to ignore. He carried himself differently from everyone else, as if the world bent slightly to make room for him. Even now, in a small-town station, people glanced at him, sensing something they couldn't quite place. "Why are you still here?" she asked finally. He looked at her, brows lifting. "Would you rather I wasn't?" She faltered, hugging Nom tighter. "I don't know." Daniel studied her for a moment, then turned his gaze toward the tracks. "Last night could have gone another way. You know that." "I know," she admitted quietly. "Then let me help you." Mai bristled. "Help me how?" "By paying my bills. By carrying my bag." His voice softened. "By being here. By making sure you don't have to fight alone." The words hit harder than she wanted them to. She looked away, heart thundering. At that moment, a sleek black sedan pulled up to the curb. A driver in a dark suit stepped out, opening the back door with professional precision. Mai froze. "What is this?" Daniel's tone was calm, matter-of-fact. "A car. To take you home." Her stomach twisted. "Home? You don't even know where I live." "I do." Her pulse jumped. She clutched Nam tighter. "How could you possibly?" Daniel met her gaze evenly. "Because I had my assistant check on you while you slept. I know your address. I know about the eviction notice. I know you've been behind on rent for 2 months. I know you were planning to stay with your sister in Eugene." Mai's blood ran cold. "You had no right." His voice remained steady, though his eyes softened. "Maybe not, but I couldn't stand by. Not after last night." Her breath came fast, sharp. Anger warred with something deeper fear. Gratitude, the terrifying pull of relief. She shook her head. "You don't know me. You don't get to decide what I need." Daniel took a slow step closer, careful not to crowd her. "You're right. But I do know this. You can't keep doing it alone. And whether you admit it or not, last night proved it." Mai's throat worked. Words stuck. The driver stood patiently by the car. The whole station watching this strange standoff between a woman clutching her child and a man who seemed carved from another world. Finally, Mai whispered, "Who are you?" Daniel held her gaze, and for the first time, he answered without deflection. "My name is Daniel Reed, CEO of Reed Global Investments, and I don't walk away." For a moment, the words hung in the air, heavy as iron. CEO. Reed Global Investments. Mai didn't know much about corporations, but even she recognized the name. It was on the glass towers downtown, on the financial reports that flashed across airport TVs, on the lips of people who lived in a world she had never touched. And this man, the stranger who had held her son through the night, was the man behind it. Her chest tightened. You're one of those billionaires. The word felt foreign, sour in her mouth. Daniel didn't flinch. That's what they call me, yes. Then why the hell were you on a midnight train? His eyes held hers, steady and unblinking. Because money doesn't buy peace. Sometimes it just buys a louder kind of loneliness. On the train, I can disappear. No headlines. No board meetings. Just people who don't know my name. I hugged Nam closer, her pulse thundering. The sedan idled by the curb, the driver still waiting, polished shoes glinting under the wet sun. Everything about this felt wrong. Too big. Too dangerous. You had no right to dig into my life, she said, her voice trembling with fury. You're right, Daniel admitted quietly. But if I hadn't, you'd be dragging him onto another train tonight, hoping his fever didn't come back. And if it did, maybe you wouldn't be so lucky next time. The words hit her like a blow, because deep down, she knew he was right. Tears burned behind her eyes. I don't want your pity. It's not pity. His voice sharpened, though not in anger. It's recognition. I see what you're carrying, and I know the cost of carrying it alone. The weight of his stare made it impossible to breathe. Mai shook her head, backing up a step. If I take your help, what happens then? You drive me home, pay a bill, and then what? Do I owe you something? Do I become one more name on your list of charity projects? Daniel stepped forward, just enough to close the space she had created. His words were low, certain, each one like a stone dropped in water. Double quotes, no, you don't owe me anything. I'm not here to collect. I'm here because last night, when I saw him burning up in your arms, I swore I wouldn't let you face that kind of night alone again. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. Why? She whispered. Daniel's gaze softened, grief flickering in the grey depths of his eyes. Because once, someone I loved didn't have anyone to fight for her. I live with that every day, and I won't live with it again. Silence pressed between them, thick and unbearable. Mai wanted to scream, to run, to collapse. But instead she stood there, trembling, Nom heavy in her arms, staring at a man who shouldn't have cared, but somehow did. At last her voice broke. I don't know if I can trust you. Daniel nodded slowly. Then don't, not yet. Just trust this. He gestured toward the car, toward the future, waiting like a door cracked open. I'm not walking away. Mai's throat tightened. She looked at the sleek sedan, then at Nom's tired face against her shoulder, then back at Daniel. Every instinct screamed caution. But another, voice quieter, more dangerous, whispered hope. And as the morning sun climbed higher over the wet rooftops, Mai realized she was standing at the edge of a choice that could change everything. The platform buzzed with ordinary life, conductors calling departures, coffee cups clattering, luggage wheels rattling over wet pavement. But for Mai, the world had narrowed to one impossible choice. Behind her, the train southbound, ready to take her and Nam toward Eugene, toward her sister's cramped spare room, toward the same cycle of scraping by in front of her, a black sedan gleaming in the weak sun. A door held open by a driver who looked like he had never known hunger, fatigue, or desperation. And Daniel Reed, billionaire, stranger, savior, threat waiting with eyes that promised something she didn't know how to name. Nam stirred in her arms, his cheek pressing into her shoulder. He was warm, but no longer still, the weight of him, fragile and alive, pressed against her ribs like a reminder. This was not just her choice. Mai's chest tightened. I can't just get in a car with you. Daniel's tone was steady, not pushing, not pleading. You don't have to. You can take the train. Walk away. Pretend last night never happened. But you'll still wake tomorrow with the same worries, the same bills, the same fear. Her jaw clenched. And if I go with you, then you'll have help. No strings, just help. She laughed bitterly, though it cracked in the middle. There are always strings. Daniel's gaze held hers, unwavering. Not this time. Mai wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to. But trust was a luxury she had burned out of herself long ago. Passengers jostled past, throwing curious glances. To them, it must have looked like a scene from a movie. A woman in thrift store clothes, clutching a child, standing opposite a man cut from wealth itself, with a luxury car idling behind him. It wasn't a movie. It was her life, and she couldn't afford the wrong ending. Her grip on Nam tightened. She turned, staring at the waiting train, at the conductor waving people aboard. She could walk away now. It would be safer, cleaner. No entanglements. But as she imagined stepping onto that train, settling into another seat, bracing for another night of fever and fear, the memory of Nom's limp body in her arms clawed back through her chest. If Daniel hadn't been there, if the doctor hadn't appeared, her son might not be breathing right now. Her legs trembled. She hated herself for hesitating. Daniel's voice broke through, low and certain. I'm not asking you to trust me. Just give me one day. If you don't like what you see, I'll drive you back myself. Mai's breath caught. One day. It sounded harmless, temporary, but her gut twisted with the knowledge that stepping into that car could change, far more than a single day. She looked at him, really looked at him, the sharp lines of his suit, the haunted grey eyes, the steady calm that had never once wavered since she met him. He was not a man who made promises lightly. Her throat burned. If I say yes, and it turns out I was wrong, then you walk away, he said simply. The horn of the southbound train blared urgent, final. Passengers filed up the steps, the last call echoing through the station. Mai's pulse hammered. She shifted Nom, his small arms curling tighter around her neck. She whispered into his hair, "What do we do, baby?" He didn't answer, of course. He only sighed in his sleep, trusting her with everything, and that trust broke her. Mai turned back to Daniel. Her voice shook, but the words came out clear. Fine, one day. Daniel inclined his head as if sealing a pact. His eyes softened, but he didn't smile. One day is all I ask. The driver stepped forward, reaching for her bag. Mai flinched but let it go. Her legs felt heavy as she approached the sedan. Every step a battle between fear and hope. The car smelled of leather and cedar polish. Too clean, too sharp. Mai slid into the back seat, clutching Nam close, her body tense like a coiled spring. Daniel entered beside her, calm as if this were the most natural thing. In the world, the door shut with a solid click as the car pulled away from the station. Mai pressed her forehead to the window, watching the train shrink into the distance. Her old life was leaving the platform. Her new one, whatever it was, had just begun. The sedan glided smoothly through the town, past sagging porches and faded storefronts, toward the freeway where the world widened into glass and steel. Mai held Nam tight against her, his small head tucked under her chin. The rhythm of the car lulled him deeper into sleep, but Mai's body remained rigid, every muscle taut. She had expected the silence to be unbearable. Instead, it was worse come, almost gentle, as if Daniel Reed belonged perfectly in this quiet space. As if nothing could shake him, Mai pressed her forehead to the cool glass, watching the landscape blur. She whispered, "This feels wrong." Daniel turned slightly. "What does?" "All of it. The car, the driver, you. I don't belong here. You belong wherever you and your son are safe." Her laugh was sharp, bitter. "Safe, with a man I met on a train. With someone who sends cars and digs through people's lives without asking." Daniel didn't flinch. "Yes, with me." His certainty infuriated her, but beneath her anger, something else stirred, something dangerously close to longing. The freeway unfurled into the city, towers rising like jagged teeth. The sedan turned off onto a quiet street lined with green oaks and high iron gates. My stomach dropped. "Where are we going?" she demanded. Daniel's gaze softened, but his voice was steady. "To my home, just for the day. You'll have food, a place to rest. No hospitals, no bills, just space." Her pulse raced. "Your home?" "Absolutely not." Before Daniel could reply, the car slowed before a set of rattan gates. They swung open automatically, revealing a long drive lined with manicured hedges. At the end rose a house that wasn't a house at all, but an estate, stone walls, tall windows, the kind of place Mai had only seen in glossy magazines. Her throat tightened. "This is insane." Daniel turned to her, calm as ever. "It's just a place. For walls, a roof. Don't let it scare you. Don't let it—" She cut off with a short, disbelieving laugh. "Daniel, I grew up in a two-bedroom apartment above a laundromat. I worked double shifts just to keep my kid in sneakers that fit. This," she gestured wildly at the sprawling property, "is another planet." Daniel's eyes didn't leave hers. "Then consider me your guide." The car stopped before the front steps. The driver opened the door with silent precision. Daniel stepped out first, then extended a hand toward her. Mai hesitated. Everything in her screamed, "Don't. Don't take his hand. Don't step into this world. Don't let him close enough to rewrite the life you fought so hard to hold together." But Nam stirred against her, restless, murmuring softly. He needed quiet. He needed rest. He needed things she couldn't give him alone. Swallowing hard, Mai ignored Daniel's hand and climbed out herself, clutching Nam close. The house loomed above them, intimidating in its silence. Inside, the air was cool and faintly scented with lemon polish. Marble floors gleamed, chandeliers sparkled, and sunlight poured through high windows. Mai felt small, every step echoing too loudly. A woman in a crisp uniform appeared, smiling warmly. "Mr. Reed, welcome home." Her gaze flicked to Mai and Nam, kind but curious. Daniel's tone was smooth, commanding. "This is Mai and her son, Nam, their guests. Please make sure they have whatever they need." "Yes, sir." Mai's cheeks burned. Guests, as if she was some charity case plucked off the street. Daniel must have sensed her stiffening, because his voice lowered as they moved deeper into the house. "You're not here out of pity, Mai. You're here because you said yes." She shot him a sharp look. "One day, that's all, one day," he agreed, though something in his eyes said he planned for far more. The maid her name was Clara led my up a wide staircase, her footsteps muffled on the thick carpet. The house was too quiet, the kind of silence that came from insulation and space, not peace. Every corner whispered of wealth, paintings in gilded frames, antique vases, curtains heavy enough to block out the world. None stirred as Clara opened a guest room door. "Here you are," she said gently. The room was larger than the apartment I had grown up in, pale blue walls, a soft bed piled with pillows, a bay window that looked out over sprawling gardens. I stood frozen on the threshold. She felt like an intruder in a museum. Clara gave her a reassuring smile. "I'll bring up some juice for your son, and coffee if you'd like." I managed a nod. "Thank you." When the maid left, she lowered Nom onto the bed. He rolled into the pillows, letting out a tiny sigh of contentment. Watching him relax into comfort, he had never known before, twisted something sharp in her chest. She sank onto the edge of the mattress, burying her face in her hands. A soft knock came at the door. Daniel's voice followed. "May I?" She wanted to say no, to shut him out, to keep this room as the only untouched corner of her reality. But her voice betrayed her. "Come in." Daniel stepped inside, carrying a tray with 2 mugs and a small plate of toast. He set it on the side table without ceremony. "I figured you hadn't eaten." "I'm not hungry," she said automatically. "Drink, anyway." He nudged a mug toward her. Steam curled from it, rich and bitter. She hesitated, then wrapped her hands around the warmth. The first sip burned her tongue, but the heat steadied her frayed nerves. Daniel sat in a chair across the room, giving her space. For a while, they said nothing. The silence was strangely easy, filled only with the sound of Nom's quiet breathing. Finally, Mai spoke, her voice low. "He's never slept in a bed like this." "Not once." Daniel's gaze softened. "Then let him." Her throat tightened. "You don't get it." "This," she gestured at the room, the house, the comfort. "This isn't our life. And it never will be. Why not?" She stared at him, incredulous. "Because people like you and people like me don't mix. Because you'll wake up tomorrow in a world of meetings and skyscrapers, and I'll still be standing in line at the food pantry. That's reality." Daniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees. His eyes were steady, grey and unyielding. "Reality can change. Not for people like me. For people like you, especially." The intensity in his voice made her chest ache. She looked away, unable to hold his gaze. Nam murmured in his sleep, rolling closer to the pillows. Mai smoothed his hair, her fingers trembling. "I can't let him get used to this," she whispered. "If I do, leaving will break him." Daniel's voice was quiet but sure. "Then don't leave." Her head snapped up. "Don't you dare. I'm not telling you what to do," he said quickly. "I'm asking you to see what's possible. One day, you said, this is that day. And if, at the end, you want to walk away, I'll drive you myself. But if you don't..." He let the words trail off, unfinished but heavy with promise. Mai's breath came fast. She hated the pull in her chest, the way her heart betrayed her with its aching hope. She turned back to Nam, whispering more to herself than to Daniel. "One day." "That's all." Daniel's voice was low, almost a vow. "Sometimes one day is enough to change everything." The house came alive slowly, like a creature stretching after a long sleep. Sunlight poured through tall windows. The smell of coffee and fresh bread drifted from the kitchen, and somewhere in the distance, The faint trill of a piano echoed. I followed Clara downstairs, with Nam still clinging sleepily to her side. The kitchen looked nothing like the cramped galley kitchens she'd known her whole life. This was warm and spacious, with a long oak table, gleaming counters, and bowls of fruit that looked too perfect to be real. Nom's eyes widened. Mummy, apples. Mai's chest tightened. At the shelter last week, she'd told him no when he'd asked for one. Too expensive, too precious. And now here they were, spilling from a bowl like they grew on trees made for someone else's life. Clara smiled and handed him one. Here you go, sweetheart. Nom took it with both hands, biting in with a crunch that made him giggle. The sound was so pure, so unguarded, that I had to blink back tears. Daniel entered then, sleeves rolled up, hair still damp from a shower. He looked different in daylight, less like a CEO, more like a man. He carried a tray with eggs and toast, setting it on the table as if it were the most natural thing in the world. You cooked? I asked before she could stop herself. A faint smile touched his mouth. Believe it or not, I learned a few things living on my own. You and Nem deserve a proper breakfast. Nem beamed around a mouthful of apple. Toast, Mummy. Daniel slid a plate toward him. And eggs. Protein for strong boys. Mai sat stiffly, the chair feeling too soft, the food too much. She waited for the catch, for the moment when generosity turned into expectation. But it didn't come. Daniel simply poured coffee, steady and calm, as though this scene belonged to him as naturally as any boardroom. For a moment, against her will, Mai let herself breathe. After breakfast, Daniel excused himself for a call. Clara offered to take Nam to the garden to see the koi pond. The boy's delighted squeals drifted back through the open doors, tugging at Mai's heart. He sounded free in a way she hadn't heard in years. Alone, Mai wandered into the sitting room. Bookshelves lined the walls, leather-bound volumes mixed with modern titles. A grand piano stood near the window, its polished surface catching the sun. She trailed her fingers along the keys, not pressing down, just feeling the cool ivory. You play? Daniel's voice came from the doorway. She spun, heart racing. No, I just used to listen. My dad loved old jazz records. Daniel stepped closer, his presence filling the room. I play sometimes, when the house feels too big. Mai studied him, caught off guard by the quiet confession. It must always feel too big. His eyes flicked around the room, then back to her. It does. Until last night, I didn't even realize how empty it was. Her breath caught. She wanted to tell him not to say things like that. Not when her heart was already so unsteady. Before she could reply, Nom's laughter rang out from the garden. Daniel smiled faintly, glancing toward the sound. He has a good laugh. Mai's throat tightened. It's been a long time since he's had reason to use it. Daniel looked at her then, really looked, and for a moment the space between them pulsed with something raw and undeniable. Mai broke eye contact, retreating toward the door. This is just one day, she reminded him, mostly for herself. Daniel's voice followed, low and certain. One day can mean everything. The morning passed quietly, almost deceptively so. Nom played in the garden with Clara, chasing butterflies through the dew-sparkled grass. Mai watched from the terrace, hugging her arms around herself. For the first time in months, her son's face was bright with color, his laughter bubbling like water over stones. Daniel appeared at her side, a pair of sunglasses in hand. He's different today. I glanced at him. He's not scared. That's rare. Daniel nodded. Fear shouldn't be a child's default. His words pressed against her chest. She wanted to argue, to push back with the hard truth that fear was reality for kids like Nam. But when she looked at her son, spinning in the grass with the sun on his cheeks, she couldn't speak. Come with me, Daniel said suddenly. Her guard went up. Where? Into the city. Just for a few hours. I have a meeting. I want you to see. My world. My froze. Absolutely not. I don't belong there. Daniel tilted his head. Maybe you do. You won't know unless you see it. She almost laughed, sharp, defensive. But Nam came running up then, clutching a daisy in his small fist. For you, Mummy. Her heart cracked open. How could she deny him a day without fear, a day with sunlight and flowers and safety? So she said nothing as Daniel arranged for the driver to bring the car around. The city was alive when they arrived. Glass towers reached toward the sky, streets thrummed with taxis, and people moved with the clipped urgency of business. The sedan cut through it all like a sleek black shark. I sat rigid in the back, Nam leaning against her, wide-eyed at the skyscrapers. Mummy, they touch the sky. She kissed his hair, whispering, don't forget the sky is ours too. The car stopped outside a gleaming building of steel and glass. Its name blazed across the top, Reed Global Investments. My stomach lurched. This is your place. Daniel's lips curved faintly. One of them, the driver opened the door. A small crowd lingered near the entrance, photographers, reporters, assistants with clipboards. The moment Daniel stepped out, heads turned, flashes sparked, I froze. No, I can't. Daniel extended a hand. You don't have to be afraid. They won't touch you. Her pulse thundered. She wanted to sink into the leather seat and disappear. But Nam squirmed, curious. What's happening, Mummy? She swallowed hard. Just people. And before she could lose her nerve, she stepped out with him. The crowd reacted instantly. Cameras swiveled. Voices rose. Mr. Reed. Who's the woman? Is that your son? Daniel, is this your family? Mai's blood ran cold. She clutched Nom tighter, shielding his face. Daniel's arm came around them, strong and steady. His voice was firm, cutting through the chaos. They're with me. And just like that, the crowd fell back. Not silenced, but restrained, as if the force of his authority bent the air around them. Mai's breath came fast. What did you just do? Daniel met her gaze, calm but unyielding. I told them the truth. Her knees threatened to give out. To the world, it had looked like a declaration, like she and Nam belonged to him. And the terrifying thing was, in that moment, she almost wanted to believe it. Inside the skyscraper, the noise fell away. The lobby was marble and chrome, every surface gleaming. Employees nodded respectfully as Daniel passed, their eyes flicking curiously to Mai and Nom, but never daring to linger. Mai felt swallowed, small, like she had wandered into a place she would never belong. Daniel leaned down, voice low. Breathe. You're safe here. But she wasn't sure safety was the word. The elevator carried them up, higher and higher, until Mai's ears popped. Nam clung to her, staring wide-eyed at the mirrored walls. When the doors opened, they stepped into a penthouse office that looked more like a glass cathedral than a workplace. The city stretched endlessly beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Sunlight striking the skyline. Mai stood rooted, overwhelmed. She had never seen the world from so high. Daniel moved easily through the space, greeted by assistants and executives with deference. He gave a few instructions, his voice cool and clipped, but his eyes returned to her and Nam with steady regularity, as though in this tower of power they were his anchor. Mai felt suffocated. She pulled Nam closer, whispering, "We don't belong here." Daniel dismissed his team with a single nod, leaving the vast office eerily quiet. He turned back to her. "Why do you keep saying that?" "Because it's true." Her voice cracked. "Look at me, Daniel. Look at him. We're not this. We never will be." Daniel stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. "Do you think I was born in towers like this? I grew up in a two-room walk-up in Newark. My sister and I shared a mattress on the floor. I know what it's like to be hungry, to be invisible. Don't you dare tell me I don't understand." The force in his voice stunned her into silence. Daniel's jaw tightened, grief flickering across his features. "I built this world out of loss, and I would burn it all down before I let you think you're not worthy of standing in it." Mai's throat closed. Her eyes burned. She wanted to believe him, God. She wanted to, but belief was dangerous. Nam tugged on her sleeve then, small voice breaking the tension. "Mummy, I'm hungry." The simplest words in the world. Yet they shattered her. Daniel crouched instantly, meeting Nam's gaze. "What do you want to eat, buddy?" Nam tilted his head, shy but curious. "Mac and cheese." Daniel smiled faintly. "Done." He tapped his watch. "Clara, please have lunch ready in the garden within 30 minutes. A voice responded through the device, efficient and calm. "Yes, Mr. Reed." Nam grinned. "Wow." Mai's heart twisted. She had spent weeks stretching ramen packets into dinners, apologizing to her son for empty cupboards. And this man, this stranger could conjure meals with a word that the difference between their worlds had never been clearer as they rode back down. Mai pressed her forehead to the glass, fighting tears. Daniel stood beside her, silent, but his presence radiated steadiness. When they returned to the estate, Clara had set a table in the garden. The sun was warm, birdsong soft. Nam devoured his food, laughing when Daniel tried to twirl spaghetti like him. For one fragile hour, it felt like a family. But when Nam ran off to chase butterflies, Mai finally broke. She turned to Daniel, her voice raw. "This can't last. You can't keep doing this. I can't let him think this is his life." Daniel's eyes searched hers, and if it could be, her chest ached. "Then I don't know if I'm strong enough to watch it disappear." He reached across the table, his hand brushing hers. Not a command, not a demand, just an offering. His voice was low, certain. "Then don't let it disappear. Stay, fight with me, not against me." The words hung between them, heavier than the storm that had nearly taken her son. Mai's breath shook. She wanted to pull back. She wanted to run. But her hand stayed where it was, trembling against his. And for the first time, she allowed herself to wonder, not with fear, but with dangerous hope. What if she didn't walk away?